Moon in the Signs intro. Today we're starting a series on the moon in the signs. The moon is often reduced to emotions, moods, and sensitivity. That is true, but it barely scratches the surface. In a chart, the moon shows how you experience yourself when there is nothing to perform, prove, or explain. It describes your instinctive reactions, your private needs, your patterns of comfort, and the ways you try to feel safe when life becomes uncertain. It also reveals what settles your nervous system, what makes you withdraw, and what you return to when you need to restore yourself. This is why the moon is not only about feelings. It is about familiarity. It is about protection. It is about the inner rhythm you live by, whether you are conscious of it or not. Two people can both say they want peace, but mean very different things by it. One may need space and quiet, another needs closeness and reassurance. One feels secure through order and predictability, another through freedom to respond in the moment. That difference is not accidental. The moon explains it. The sign the moon is in shows how those instincts take shape. It changes the emotional style, the coping pattern, and the way a person looks for steadiness. Some moon placements process everything immediately and visibly. Others hold things in until they can make sense of them in private. Some need movement, some need consistency, some need control, and some need trust before they can truly relax. The same applies to attachment and daily life. The moon describes what feels natural to you, what you depend on without always realizing it, and where you can become reactive, guarded, or overly attached when your needs go unmet. It often shows the habits that keep you grounded, and the habits that keep repeating simply because they are familiar. In the natal chart, the sign shows the style, the house shows where these patterns play out most clearly, and the aspects show whether the moon moves with ease, tension, or intensity. So in this series, we're starting with the sign. We're going to look at how the moon operates in each sign, what it needs, how it protects itself, what helps it feel secure, and where it can become stuck in patterns that no longer serve it. No recycle keywords, no flat stereotypes, just how the placement actually works. Remember to like and subscribe if you want to follow the series, and book a consultation for a more personal understanding of your chart. Moon in Aries. Moon in Aries does not sit with a feeling quietly in the corner and journal about it for 6 days. It reacts fast. This is one of the clearest moon placements when it comes to instinctive emotional response, because what it feels tends to show up immediately. Maybe not always in a dramatic way, but definitely in a direct one. Something happens, and the system answers right away. There is very little emotional buffering here. The moon describes what makes you feel safe, how you process experience, and what your inner self does when life becomes too much. In Aries, that process is active, immediate, and hot-blooded. This is not a moon that wants to sit still with uncertainty for too long. It would rather do something. Anything, honestly. Call, leave, decide, move furniture, start a new plan at 11:40 p.m., have one emotionally important thought, and suddenly reorganize its whole life by sunrise. The point is movement. That is one of the most important things to understand about Moon in Aries. Emotional security is tied to momentum. These people often feel better when they can respond quickly, act on what they feel, and regain a sense of direction. When they're forced to stay in limbo, over-explain themselves, or wait around in emotional fog, irritation builds fast. Because this moon placement does not enjoy suspended animation. It likes clarity. It likes action. It likes the sense that something is happening now. That does not mean every moon in Aries person is loud, chaotic, or constantly starting fights for cardio. It means their inner life works quickly. There is a strong link here between feeling and motion. They often know how they feel before other people have even located the emotional menu. And once they know, they usually want to do something with that information. That can make them seem brave emotionally. And in many ways, they are. Moon in Aries often has a lot of courage when it comes to starting over, confronting discomfort, or responding honestly in the moment. If something is wrong, they tend to know quickly. If something feels exciting, they tend to move toward it. If something hurts, the first response is often not collapse, but reaction. Sometimes that reaction is useful. Sometimes it is just a flamethrower in a kitchen. This is one of the main lessons of the placement. Not every emotion needs immediate deployment, because Moon in Aries can confuse urgency with importance. Not everything that feels intense in the moment is actually the main issue. Sometimes it is just the first wave. But this moon does not naturally trust waiting. Waiting feels exposed. Waiting feels powerless. Waiting feels like standing in the middle of a room while your nervous system yells, well, are we handling this or are we decorating it? So people with this placement often need to learn how to pause without feeling defeated. Not suppress, not deny, not become fake and overly polished. Just pause long enough to make sure the reaction and the truth are the same thing. Now, when Moon is in Aries, the emotional nature is usually straightforward. They are not always subtle about what they need. If they are upset, you will probably notice. If they are excited, you will definitely notice. If they are done, the atmosphere often changes immediately. There can be something refreshingly honest about this. A lot of people make emotions difficult by wrapping them in 10 layers of implication, performance, silence, and strategic confusion. Moon in Aries is often much easier to read. Not always softer, but easier to read. And that matters, because even when this placement is reactive, there is often very little manipulation in it. What you see is usually the real signal, at least in that moment. They are not always planning emotional chess moves. They are much more likely to slam the chessboard emotionally, announce that the vibe is off, and go for a walk. Now, let's talk about what makes this moon feel safe. Moon in Aries needs room to respond as itself. It needs permission to have an instinct. It needs movement. It needs the sense that it can act, choose, initiate, and protect itself if necessary. This is why overly restrictive environments can feel especially difficult for this placement. Too much control, too much emotional policing, too much pressure to be endlessly accommodating. All of that can make Moon in Aries feel cornered. And when this moon feels cornered, it does not become sweeter. It becomes sharper. There is a strong protective quality here. Moon in Aries often defends itself very quickly, sometimes before a threat has fully formed. That can look like impatience, irritability, defensiveness, or sudden withdrawal. But underneath it, there is usually a simple instinct. I need to keep my center intact. So even though Aries is often described as bold, the moon here can actually be very sensitive in a fast, fiery way. Not delicate, reactive. There is a difference. This placement may not sit around announcing emotional fragility to the room, but it absolutely feels things. It just tends to deal with them through action, anger, independence, or immediate response rather than prolonged emotional immersion. That is why Moon in Aries people are often misunderstood. Others may assume they are less affected than they really are, just because they recover quickly or move on fast. But moving fast does not always mean feeling less. Sometimes it means the feeling is so immediate that the whole system wants resolution now. And sometimes that moving on is real. Sometimes it is just sprinting past the wound with excellent posture. Now, in relationships, Moon in Aries needs honesty and aliveness, not endless emotional theater, not passive-aggressive rituals, not a relationship where every conversation feels like a hostage negotiation with decorative pillows. They need directness. They usually do better when people say what they mean, respond clearly, and do not drag simple issues through 17 rounds of interpretive dance. Emotional ambiguity gets old very fast here. This moon wants to know where it stands. Even if the truth is inconvenient, it is often easier for Moon in Aries to deal with that than with vagueness. At least a real answer gives them something to work with. Unclear energy just leaves them pacing internally like a caffeinated security guard. They also need relationships that stay alive. This does not mean constant chaos or dramatic nonsense every 3 business days. It means energy, engagement, presence, something real to respond to. Moon in Aries tends to struggle when emotional life becomes flat, stale, or overly repetitive. If everything starts feeling emotionally beige, restlessness grows. There needs to be some spark, some initiative, some reminder that the connection is still happening in the present tense. Now, one of the more charming things about this placement is that it can be very emotionally brave. They often say what others avoid saying. They often act when others hesitate. They often recover by deciding, trying, moving, or beginning again. There is resilience here, a kind of emotional elasticity. Life hits, and this moon often bounces back through action. That is a real strength. They are not naturally built for wallowing. Even when they are hurt, some part of them is already looking for the exit, the solution, the next step, or at the very least, a dramatic haircut. And yes, sometimes that keeps them going. Sometimes it keeps them from processing properly. Again, both things can be true. This is why emotional maturity with Moon in Aries often involves learning that strength is not only reaction. It is also restraint. It is also timing. It is also knowing when not to turn every passing irritation into a full internal revolution. Because this moon placement can flare up quickly. The good news is that it usually cools down quickly too. Moon in Aries is not always built for long emotional grudges unless other chart factors reinforce that. Often the reaction is immediate, intense, and then gone once the energy moves. They may get angry fast, but they are also often surprisingly ready to move on once the moment has passed. That can actually be a gift. They do not always enjoy carrying dead, emotional weight around for sport. But the shadow side is acting too soon, speaking too fast, or making permanent decisions from temporary emotional fire. That is where problems start. The feeling is real. The first impulse is real. The conclusion is not always ready yet. Now let's talk about childhood patterns because the moon often points there too. With Moon in Aries, there is often some early lesson around having to become emotionally self-starting. Maybe the environment rewarded strength more than vulnerability. Maybe there was conflict. Maybe there was inconsistency. Maybe they learned, consciously or not, that waiting for comfort was not efficient, so they developed quick emotional independence instead. Not in every case, of course, but very often, this placement grows through learning how to protect itself by acting first, feeling later, or staying strong through movement. As adults, that can make them capable and bold, but it can also make rest feel unfamiliar. Because when your instinct is always handle it, receiving support can feel weirdly unnatural at first. Moon in Aries often trusts itself before it trusts softness, and that is important to understand, because the deeper need here is not constant battle. It is the freedom to exist without feeling trapped. It is the confidence that they can respond to life directly. It is the sense that their emotions are allowed to move instead of being caged, managed, or over-edited into politeness. In daily life, this moon usually benefits from physical outlets. Movement helps. Action helps. Fresh air helps. Having something to do helps. When they are stuck, inactive, or emotionally overloaded with nowhere for the energy to go, frustration can pile up fast. This placement does not do especially well with emotional stagnation. It needs circulation. Sometimes the cure is not another hour of analysis. Sometimes the cure is literally standing up. Now, let's talk about the shadow patterns more clearly. The first is impulsive reaction, feeling something strongly and treating the first emotional impulse like a signed legal document from the universe. The second is defensiveness, protecting themselves so quickly that they push away support, nuance, or connection before it even has a chance to arrive. The third is mistaking activation for truth. Just because something triggers a strong emotional response does not automatically mean it is right, important, or meant to be pursued. Sometimes it is just familiar. Sometimes it is just irritating. Sometimes it is just your inner fire alarm detecting toast. Moon in Aries matures a lot when it learns to tell the difference. Another important lesson here is that independence and isolation are not the same thing. This moon absolutely needs autonomy, but sometimes it leans so hard into self-reliance that it forgets other people can actually help. Vulnerability can feel slow. Receiving can feel awkward. Depending on someone may feel like handing over the steering wheel while the car is still moving. Not ideal. So part of the growth is learning that support is not weakness and closeness is not necessarily control. The healthiest moon in Aries knows how to keep its fire without burning every bridge that asks for patience. Now, when this placement is working well, it is lively, honest, courageous, and emotionally energizing. It brings freshness. It brings initiative. It brings a strong survival instinct and a refusal to stay stuck forever. These people can be incredibly encouraging when others are frozen because Moon in Aries understands something important. Sometimes you do not need a perfect answer. Sometimes you need motion. That said, not all motion is wisdom. And that is the refinement. The goal is not to become less fiery, less honest, or less instinctive. The goal is precision. To respond without overreacting. To feel without turning every feeling into an emergency. To stay brave enough for truth, but steady enough to know which truth actually matters. Because Moon in Aries has real strength, not the cold kind, not the detached kind, the living kind, the kind that gets back up, the kind that says, fine, then I'll deal with it, the kind that keeps moving, keeps learning, keeps trying again. It may not always be the calmest moon placement. It may not always be the most patient. It may not always win awards for emotional subtlety and strategic silence, but it is real. And in a world full of emotional fog, delay, and people saying, I'm fine, like it is a legal shield, that kind of honesty is worth a lot. Please remember to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and book a consultation for a more personal understanding of your chart.